Welcome to Second Chapter, Unforgettable Career Stories Podcast. I'm Karen Sharp-Price, and I'm so glad you're here. Back in 2020, I launched a podcast called SharpHR Career Corner. The goal was simple, to create a library of real conversations with people in all kinds of roles across industries sharing their career stories. Over 3 years, in 53 episodes, those stories became a reminder that there's no real single path to a meaningful career. Now I'm back with a new mini-series, Second Chapter. This is for those of you who love the original podcast and for those just finding us for the first time. Since COVID, I've noticed something powerful. So many people have paused, reflected, and realized that life is just too short to stay stuck in work that doesn't fit anymore. Second Chapter is about those moments, the pivots, the risks, the brave decisions to choose work that actually feels meaningful. These are real stories from real people who dared to change direction and start their next chapter. I hope you enjoy. Welcome, everyone. This podcast is all about the moments when someone decides their career story isn't finished yet. Sometimes a second chapter comes after years of experience, leadership, and success in one field, followed by the courage to step into something new. Today's guest, Chad Rogers, has lived several remarkable chapters already, from serving in the United States Navy to working as a flight paramedic to spending nearly 3 decades with Virginia State Police. Chad built a career defined by service, leadership, and steady decision-making in high-pressure moments. Today, he's writing another chapter as an attorney and advisor to businesses, bringing with him a unique perspective shaped by emergency medicine, investigations, public safety, and leadership at the highest levels. Chad, welcome.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
We'll get into the reason why we actually met in a few minutes, but I was really impressed with all the things that you've done, and I can feel the momentum that you have in your career. I read something that you had posted, and it really spoke to me, and that's why I reached out. So let's talk a little bit. You've had, already incredible career across the Navy, emergency medicine, 3 decades within the Virginia State Police. I think that I read somewhere on your bio that you were an EMT at age 16. So you've been in the line of service for a very long time. Can you walk us through that journey and what first drew you to the life of service?
I'd be happy to, but I've got to confess something here. I don't know that I was necessarily drawn, or if I was, I'm not going to do well at trying to explain how I got there. I'm one of those interesting people in life because I probably could have told you by the time I was 8 I wanted to be a trooper. There was just something different about them, the way they carried themselves, the professionalism with how they presented themselves, where I grew up. And that always struck and resonated with me. Now, I'll come back to the exact moment that it was clearly defined. But as I grew up, I was in a small town in Southwest Virginia. And that is both a blessing and a curse. I half say as I go home now, there's some very large mountains, and those mountains do a dual purpose. They both keep things in and they keep things out. So where I grew up, there wasn't necessarily a tremendous amount of good things for a 16-year-old boy to get into. So when I was younger, I had been at the football games every Friday night. I grew up in an area where football on Friday nights, that was the thing. My high school team won the championship 3 of the 4 years I was in high school.
Wow.
So this was a big deal in that community. It truly was. And I can remember, for me, I was watching the games, but I also was watching the rescue squad members go up and down the sidelines during the games.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes during the games, they would get that call, and here they go. They're in the ambulances, the lights are going, the sirens going, they're leaving the game. And I'm thinking, wow, that could be really interesting. And so, yes, by the time I was 16, I was in my first EMT class, and it did progress from there. My one of my best friends was joking at me because he figured out that my testing date for EMT might have been November of 1990. I'll neither confirm nor deny, but and I've been there ever since. And so that's sort of where it was absolutely solidified. I want to go do this. I want to learn this. It just seemed interesting and certainly better than a lot of other things I could have gotten into.
Yeah, sure.
Now, I already had an interest in being a trooper, but I will never forget the night that it was absolutely solidified. Um, I was on a rescue squad call, interestingly enough, and the town I grew up in is called Big Stone Gap, and there's another town, and I'm going to ask people to defer to me on this. I grew up there. I know what the locals call it, and the other town is called Appalachian, as opposed to Appalachian. And a person had been driving, doing something bad. I don't remember, but we're just either right inside of Appalachia or on the line. And the Appalachia police officer and the Big Stone police officer, they're discussing between the two of them who's going to make the arrest. And it's not an argument between the two of them. Between the two of them, they're not certain who has the better claim to jurisdiction over the offense. There was a trooper there, and I will never forget this as long as I live. He looked at him. I mean, he was professional. He wasn't arrogant. Everybody was in agreement here. He said, "I'll settle this." He walked over, put his hands on the man, and said, "You're under arrest." And that was the end of it. And that for me was really the moment I was like, wow, that is where I want to be. So that was sort of where that foundation was built and where I came from. And as far as the United States Navy, and this is complete candor. I'd like to make this sound cool, but this is the honesty. Um, I was very blessed at the age of 19 to have discovered the Jefferson College of Health Sciences in Roanoke, Virginia, when it was that. I went there for a year. The problem was when I was much younger, I was a different person. I think a lot of us grow and evolve over time.
Mhm.
I did not like going to school. I did not want to be in college. I was there because that was my mother's expectation. And, sometimes you just go along, you go with the flow. And so the problem was you couldn't be a trooper until you were 21. And so I wanted the discipline and the background to go on and successfully serve my Commonwealth as a trooper. And that was why I made the decision to go into the United States Navy. Specifically, I knew what I wanted to do. I wasn't one of those people that suddenly found themselves in the military. I was there for very specific reasons, and that was to gain the maturity, the experience to come out of the United States Navy and succeed serving this Commonwealth.
Wow. I mean, you realized that at an early age then, just out of high school and thinking, and that's another common thread through your story, which I'm also going to be talking about in a few minutes, is you seem to be somebody who really, and no pun intended, you really look down the road and to see what the obstacles are before you get there and pivot or adjust before you get to the situation. That I mean, and as I started to read your story through, I really saw that coming through. And as a state police, I would assume that you're always looking down the road too. So there must be something to that. So you've spent many years as a state in the state police for Virginia, and you eventually rose to the role of captain and chief information officer. What has that career meant to you personally?
Okay. Um, so just kind of bear with me. I'm going to try and work through this as best as I can without crying. Um, so I think the short answer is everything. There's a line from the movie Top Gun Maverick that has really stuck with me since the first time I heard it. And that line is very simply, it's not what I do, it's who I am. And, there are people I can have debates with. You're too much in your job. Maybe it's unhealthy. I recognized long ago my job does not love me back. I'm good with that. I've come to terms. but when you ask what it's meant, there's a story I'll share with you. And I think it kind of tells the point, and I'm going to get beat up for this. I accept that. Um, it was probably 2009. Now, first of all, let me say something. My wife is an absolutely amazing woman. Okay. Uh, she is phenomenal. But she also, one of the things she had to come to terms with when our relationship was, I was a trooper first. And I know I recognize there are a lot of people that would perceive that as being out of order and incorrect. This works for me and it works for us. But I'm pretty sure if you cut me open instead of red and blue or purple, I bleed blue and gray. I do question that at times. So it's 2009 and I've had sinus surgery. And my wife, as I'm coming out of the anesthesia, and that's forever going to be my story, it was the anesthesia. Before we went in, I went in for the surgery. I had to turn over all my jewelry to my wife. And so I've got a necklace I've had for most of my life, my wedding band, and then there's the state police ring that I've had, since I graduated from the academy. And I'm coming out of the anesthesia, and I asked for my ring. My wife was good enough to hand me my wedding band, and under the influence of anesthesia, I promptly let her know that was not the ring I was asking for. So, I'm pretty sure the only reason I've survived that one to this day was what was the anesthesia claim I can make. But when you ask what my career has meant to me over the course of my life, recognize it is that level of thought. It is that young man who who knew at a very young age what he wanted to do. And that knowledge literally guided and shaped almost every aspect of my life to some degree since the day the decision was reached.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that has been your dream since you were just a little kid. So so years before though, before you left Virginia State Police, you were already studying law and you eventually became licensed. So what sparked that interest in law when you really were in a career that was your dream?
Well, there were actually a couple things. Now, there a very long time ago, I used to joke that I would either go to law school or med school when I grew up. For the record, I didn't grow up. I was simply 33 and felt that I was running out of time.
Mm.
So here is what actually happened in the background. First of all, I had a GI Bill from the Navy. That money needed to be used for something positive. No question about that. Beyond that, I was a trooper assigned to Northern Virginia. And Karen, I can't tell you over the course of time how many of my peers I saw literally go to work on a night and their career ended that night.
Oh, wow.
Um, I don't know if the blue lights on our cars attract people to us or tell them to move over. I truly don't.
Mhm.
And I could actually name the gentleman whose end of his career actually made the decision for me. But the bottom line is, I recognized I needed a plan B. I had to have another way to take care of myself and my family if something happened to me out on those interstates one night. So that was the kind of the one major piece of it.
Wow.
Now, the other thing that brought about the change was this. I'm a self-confessed nerd. I've written that before, and I will absolutely admit it. And one of the things that I was really good at, or believe I was really good at on the road, was search and seizure law. I would go into court, and I'm a trooper. I haven't been to law school yet. I've got binders of the case law, and I knew what the law was on a lot of the things I had done, and I could use that very effectively. I will forever maintain one of the problems in my profession is we fail to accurately and adequately articulate why we did what we did. So I would go into court and I would have binders and I knew what the case law was and I knew exactly why I had done the things I had done and I had the case law to support it. Well, there was a very specific thing that happened to me recurringly. Oh, you can't say that. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not an attorney. Reality is, and I still maintain I was right, but I got tired over the course of time of people in my mind kind of looking down on me and just not even considering what I had to say, not because they wanted to discuss the argument or that I was making or what the law said, but they wouldn't even have the conversation with me because I didn't have that license in my pocket.
Mhm.
So between realizing I need the plan B and just one of my core philosophies that more has been done through irritation than was ever accomplished through motivation, I eventually went to law school for that plan B and to show, yes, I do have this minimum competence and I do know what I'm talking about.
So while you were serving with the state police, you were building experience working with businesses and legal matters. How was it to balance those two professions in professional worlds at the same time? How did you manage that?
It it is challenging, um, and I won't say anything different. And I would say this as a parent, I did what I had to do to provide for my family. So in some ways, this was a choice, and in other ways, there were a lot of considerations in the choice. In 2012, my wife was bending over a baby gate. My wife was an emergency room and critical care nurse before that time. She hurt her back and subsequently failed back surgery. So, that was the first blow to our income. And the bottom line is our family income from 2012 to 2014 was cut to one third,
Mm,
almost one third of what it had been. Devastating cut, as you might imagine.
yeah.
So, as far as how I balance that, in order to provide for my family, having a wife that could not work, something else had to be done on the side. And so I made a lot of choices. I worked overtime. I had a side business advising business clients. The truth is, Karen, on one hand, my children had clothes. We had a roof over our head. We had food on our table. We were able to take vacations, and my children have had some very special experiences. I took the philosophy that, hey, I'm providing for them. My wife at least gets the time with them. But at the same time, on a personal level, it's not to say there's not a lot of minutes in there that I'd love to have everyone back and would love to have been spending time with them. Long term, I, I've got two children that I'm incredibly proud of. They're literally scouts. I've got a 15-year-old. I hear other parents speak about their relationship with their 15-year-old. I don't identify with that. I am very blessed because of the relationship I have with mine.
Mhm.
But, the answer to your question, I think, is how did I balance it as best as I could and with a deep amount of regret about some things.
Well, and you had to do it. You were the one that had to kind of keep the family moving forward, I guess. So in the beginning, when we started, I was talking about a post that you had made. We have never met until today. And I came upon your post. It's been about, I guess, a couple months now. And it caught my attention and honestly, my heart. Like when I read it, it just really moved me. And I felt through your post the love that you have for the state police, and your determination to provide your family with everything that they needed. And then also the gratitude to God for helping you stay safe and helping you along that way. And then you recently shared that you had an autoimmune disease that made it medically impossible for you to continue with the state police. What was the moment like when you realized that that chapter of your career was coming to an end, and maybe sooner than you anticipated, because that career had been something that started back when you were just a little kid. Um, what was that feeling like? What was that thought process like when you had to go through that moment?
Well, so uh, it really sort of starts years ago. So the disease I have, there's a great probability that I'm going to go blind at some point.
Wow.
And I came to terms with that a very long time ago. It just is what it is. Um, the problem is that the treatments to slow that process down, I think at this point there's legitimate discussion to be had if the treatments have been worse than the disease.
Mm.
And I'll bring that out in just a second. I've got the skin of an 80-year-old. I've got paper thin skin. I can't even wrestle with my boys right now because it'll do damage with me. So, in 2024, I was going through, and you're right, I did post about this. It was just medical thing after medical thing. We couldn't get my disease back under control. And so I really thought that year I was done. And right up until mid-September, and God, for whatever reason, I call it grace, I call it kindness. He gave me additional time because we hit my disease with everything and it wasn't backing off. It just wasn't. But for some reason in September of that year, it calmed back down. I don't know what it was, but the irony here is that the writing on the wall that my career was over actually appeared in September 1 year later. And I can tell you the moment that I realized I was done. And I was in our local gym. I was taking a gentle yoga class, and that's actually the name of the class. Now, and I think this is important because it communicated volumes to me. I wasn't in a pose. I wasn't doing anything particularly creative. I was on a yoga mat, chest down on the ground, breathing. That's it. On a yoga mat, chest down on the ground, breathing. And I fractured a rib.
Oh,
Heard and felt it pop.
ooh.
And one of the requirements for us is that we have to be able to go into the field at any time. Even as a captain, I do not medically qualify to be a sworn member of that department if they cannot send me into the field.
Hmm.
And that was the final moment for me. At that point, I started really recognizing, you know, wow, I've got one chase, I've got one fight left in me, and it's probably life altering if it happens. So for me, just driving back and forth to the office each day, what happens if I come across a trooper fighting on the side of the road?
Mm.
So that was the turning point that you asked about. That was the moment when I realized, okay, your career's over. The risk is inordinate, and for your sake and the sake of your family, it's time to go somewhere else.
You have been very aware in touch with yourself and everything around you every step of this way. Because a lot of people would just put their blinders up and be like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen, da da da. But you really understood and I guess accepted it. I mean, you did what you needed to do. I don't know if you accepted it in processing it. So how do you process something like that when your career that you truly love, you sort of have to put to the side at that point?
Well, and over my career, I've been incredibly blessed to lead some ridiculously high performing teams. An interdiction team that um, outperformed the rest of the state combined. A, um, a team that I did a presentation to them, and I started it with a picture and a quote from Walt Disney that I'm very fond of. It's kind of fun to do the impossible, and it's got a great picture of him. The castle is still being built at the time. It's a shadow. You can see through it. It's not there yet.
Uh-huh.
And to me, the impossible is just something that hasn't been done yet. And so the standard I train my teams to is this. I'm not the leader that minds if you tell me no. If you come to me and say we just can't do something, I accept your answer. But the moment we've identified what cannot be done, then there has to be a pivot that goes with that. Okay, now we know what we can't do. So we're going to start asking ourselves what we can do. And I reached a point, September of 25, when it was apparent to me that I could not be with the state police anymore. And really and truly, and this is where I give thanks to God, what I went through in 2024 showed me how utterly unprepared I was to leave that department. So I
Mm.
had time to start getting ready. I knew it was much closer than I cared to acknowledge. So in 24, I get that first shot over the bow. I start laying the grounds. In 25, I get the sign, the rib fracture for no apparent reason. This is not safe for you anymore. Not that being a trooper is safe to begin with, but there's the risk you accept, and then there's inordinate under the right circumstances. I've got a life-altering injury. And so from that standpoint, I began prepping, and I came to a basic realization. At the end of the day, I'm still a husband. I'm still a father to two children. I have a mother-in-law that I support. Now, it kills me. There have been moments I've struggled with your interview today.
Mhm.
If I sit and dwell and think on this too much, I'm going to sit there and cry and I'm going to die or wallow in self-pity.
Mhm.
Well, I can't do that. I don't have that luxury. So I either accept what I can't do and pivot to what I can do, the very things I would have expected of the people I've worked with for years, or in the alternative, I watch myself disintegrate into nothing and fail at the most basic responsibilities I have.
Mm.
So for me, I think the short answer to your question is, as far as perspective and response, well, I focus on what it is that I have to do, and that's how I keep going.
And you were lucky enough to have 3 decades doing that, doing what you loved, and the foresight to already have started this other career years ago so that you had something to fall back on if this moment were to happen. There are so many people that don't prepare ahead for a plan B. And I think the majority of people always need to have a plan B in their life because life is so unpredictable. But in your post, you wrote that we can't always control what happens to us, but we can control our response. How did that mindset help you navigate this transition?
Well, I think it's exactly what I shared with you. Um, Again, this was devastating to me. Um, I cannot let myself dwell on it. I have to fight at moments to even discuss it.
Hmm.
Um, if you want to talk about grief and mourning, we can have that conversation. But And so that is exactly where I was. I had to make myself focus on what had to be done. I can't let myself get to that dark place. Um, we talk about blindness, but there's a darkness out there that's worse. And it could, for me, if I allowed it, become a depression that I may or may not get out of.
Right.
But I recognize that I can't let myself get to that place. I have to stop that. And I have to intervene before I go down that path.
And with all this background that you have now, emergency medicine, investigations, the law enforcement leadership, now law. How do all these experiences that you've had shape the way that you're now going to be serving your clients today?
Well, I think it's a different mindset. Um, I look at some of my attorney peers, and then I began talking with the client, and I have certain approaches, certain beliefs. I'm not 25 anymore. At this point in my life, I'm 52. I approach things with a calmness that I may not have had 27 years ago. Uh, you asked me, is this a crisis? Well, keep in mind when you're talking about a crisis or an emergency, I've come off the deck at Alexandria Hospital with my hands in somebody's gut, trying to keep them from bleeding to death long enough for me to get them to a surgeon at Fairfax Hospital. There's a distinction between life and death. There's a process that we go through to manage any crisis. The first step is you stop the bleeding. Then we go to crisis mitigation. It's got to be a process. One of my core philosophies when I start thinking about working with a business, and this, I think this is also a distinction. I can come in and I can give you the legal ramifications of everything you're thinking about as a business leader. I can legal you right out of business. I kept you safe,
Hmm.
but we can discuss your profits. By contrast, I come in with a very team oriented, a very collaborative approach. I'm going to lay your options in front of you. Why? Because instead of believing that my specific role was the most important and the be all end all, I recognize that business owner, very few issues are a pure legal issue. Sometimes they are, but most of them are going to intersect with your accounting system. They're going to intersect with your HR system. They're going to intersect with your operations of your business. There's going to, and from that standpoint, I start to think about practicing law not unlike the human body. If your liver's sick, Karen, you don't just feel it in your liver, it affects the entire organism. Well,
Mhm.
guess what? If your HR system's sick, you don't have an employee handbook that adequately covers you, guess what? That has ripple effects across the entire organism that is your business. And so, from that standpoint, I pride myself on being willing to have those conversations. I tend to get close to the people I work with. We form actual relationships. I care, I know them. I know them as people, and I know and understand what their goals are. So instead of coming in and telling them what they're going to do, we're going to have a conversation between me, you, and your HR person. Everyone's going to understand the risks and benefits of each path. And then we're going to pick the one we think best overall for your organism. So that's really how it helps me is I just bring a level of communication, understanding priorities, and an ability to prioritize your needs with that collaborative approach. And those are what I think is important in forming that solid, long-lasting client relationship.
It's a very holistic way of looking at it because you're not you're not that doctor who specializes in one thing. You're the general practitioner who looks at everything and how it interacts to make that organization stronger.
Well, no, I love your analogy because quite honestly, that's how I've described myself many times. Particularly working with small and mid-sized businesses, the smaller the business is, the less I can afford to be specific.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is I've described myself as the general practitioner. I'm not the oncologist. I'm not the cardiologist. I'm the guy that's going to work with you side by side. And when you get to a point, well, we're going to call in the specialist that you need to fix it for you.
Mhm. Well, and in the old days, you'd have one general practitioner and they would pretty much take care of everything because they knew the parts really well. Now you got the general practitioner as soon as, your one part hurts, they send you off and hope that that person is going to take good care of you. So as you step into this new chapter, focusing on law, your family, service, what excites you the most about what lies ahead?
Well, um, for me, it's an opportunity to do some things I haven't necessarily done before.
Mhm.
Um, one thing I've not done a good job of is having hobbies and interests for myself. And right now, I've got a 12-year-old son. We've got an idea for a cooking show that we want to work on. Are we going to succeed? I don't know, but are we going to do it together? Heck yeah. And that's the important thing. That there
Mhm.
are organizations that I look forward to being a part of. We have a church that we attend when we're in Florida. Right now, we live in Virginia, but we're anticipating a move in the near future. Very much looking forward to a very active role with that church. Have wanted to be involved with Make-A-Wish Foundation for a very long time, and there's another charitable organization out there that I have a strong interest in. So for me, I'm taking this as an opportunity to step back from hour work week on a calm week, usually 50 to 60, and really focus on things that matter, family and some charitable organizations. And if we could, there is one thing I'd like to go back to.
Sure.
Um, just very briefly. Earlier, you asked how I do it, and as I keep going, if there's any one thing I could share with somebody,
Mhm.
uh, you're in a position, you find a life choice forced upon you. My favorite book on leadership is called Extreme Ownership. And I'm a huge fan of this book. Now, I do think there's a problem with the book. I think it goes too far. They brought it back in the second book. The pendulum came back where it needed to be. But I do think in Extreme Ownership, does just go a little bit too far to the extreme. At some point, you can't train somebody. At some point, you just fire them, and for the good of the organization, you call it a day. But up until we get to that point where they've just gone too far, I think it's a great book. But where I'm going with this is here. The thing I would suggest to all people, when this really comes out of the book, step up, take responsibility, whether it be for yourself, for your team. Don't let yourself fall into what I call or would consider to be victim mentality. The
Mhm.
moment you start to think of yourself as a victim, you don't have control. The outcome was predetermined. There was nothing you could have done. Ergo, there's no reason for you to make a change or an adjustment. By contrast, if you can move yourself to that ownership mindset, can I control everything? No, I can't. But the moment I start to ask myself what is within my control and I can make changes, it gives my mind something to focus on, something to work towards, and it takes it off that pain that I'm actually experiencing. And it's very much empowering, and it really starts to bring my goals and give me a direction. Just like a second ago, I listed out for you what's important. Okay, I can't be with the state police anymore, but by George, I can go work this second career. And now I'm not going to make the mistake I made before. I don't have to. I'm going to focus on my family. I'm going to focus on the volunteer activities I want to be a part of. And I'm going to see what we can do to improve the quality of life for me and the people around me that I love.
I think that's really important advice because there's so many things that happen in people's lives nowadays. Health issues, layoffs, life circumstances, everything changes. And everything is becoming more and more fluid. Things are changing much, much faster. And so having that one mindset that things might happen, two, not sitting with it too long. I think that that also sort of traps people. They get stuck and they don't know how to make that next step forward. But then I think for you at least, I think you had this mindset from maybe age 8 when you decided that you wanted to be state trooper, that nothing was going to stop you from achieving these things. And, you didn't decide to go into accounting. I don't know. I mean, I'm picking anything. You're picking something that is very connected to law enforcement. I mean, law is the next step over. So, um, but it feels like when you were kind of going through all these things and in your career, um, you were already in it before you knew you were in law. Like, so you had all these books and all these law sections that you could speak on. And I think that when someone wouldn't say, hey, I respect what you're saying, they're saying, hey, you don't have a law degree, so we're not going to talk to you or listen to you. That sort of just got you more motivated to say, well, wait a minute, if all I need is just a degree, then yeah, okay, I'll go get it. I'll come back to the table in a few minutes. And then you did. I mean, if more of us had that mindset and just don't let life get in the way. Be ready to pivot. And I think more, kids coming out of college nowadays, they say that they're going to probably pivot their careers 5, 6, 7 times in their lifetime. So it's almost you have to have that kind of mindset is, yeah, I love what I do, but I better have something for a rainy day and have something else that I might be interested in. And now for you, you're finding all these other things that you actually have a passion for. These community things that you really want to get involved in. And maybe if you stayed as a state trooper, you would still not have enough time to do those things. So now you're going to have more time with your kids, your wife, the community, kind of get out there. If you're moving down to Florida, you might even get a boat, who knows, and enjoy the water. So I think that your story is just really inspirational for many people that feel stuck at this very moment. And when they hear all that you've gone through, all that you're doing, and, you could possibly just kind of sit back and relax a little bit, but no, I don't see that at all happening in your life. Like you haven't said the retirement word at all in our conversation. So I don't know if that's something that you think about, or that you love community, you love people, you love serving. It's going to be with you forever.
Well, and so to your point, I don't think of it as retirement. I truly don't.
Yeah.
Now, I have talked with my wife, and I have made a firm promise that I will do my best to limit my work to 20 hours a week.
Uh-huh.
I need to spend more time taking care of myself and more time taking care of my family. I accept that.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I look at it as a reprioritization. Okay, you know, we're going to bring some balance back in. We're going to have some quality of life here.
Yeah.
And then what can I do with that time? And, I am blessed, I guess, because there are some legitimate interests I have,
Hmm.
and things I want to explore. Now, there's some social things too. I will be in a model railroad club somewhere, but, again, Make-A-Wish Foundation, my church, and one other organization I'm very interested in joining with my 15-year-old son. That's really some difference I want to make.
Yeah, that's great. I think that you've got an amazing story, and I think you're going to be an inspiration for so many different people. I mean, who knows? Maybe this is another chapter which makes you go off and do motivational speaking, because I think you've got enough stories that you can really connect and relate to your audience. And I think that that's really important. Thank you so much, Chad. I really do appreciate it. I'm so glad. I hesitated to message you on LinkedIn because we didn't know each other. And I thought, well, why not? I think that other people would really love to hear this. And so thank you for one, accepting my invite on LinkedIn, and two, also taking the time to speak with me today. I really do appreciate that.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's absolutely been my pleasure, and I appreciate your time just walking me through the questions and your patience with me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, those that are listening, if your journey reminds us that careers are rarely just one straight line, the experiences that we gather along the way, especially in moments of pressure and leadership and service, often become the foundation for chapters that follow. Transitions can feel uncertain, but they can also open doors to new ways of making an impact. Your story is a great reminder that a second chapter isn't about starting over. It's about building forward with everything that we've already learned. For those listening, if you enjoy hearing stories like this about career transitions, leadership, and second chapters, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a comment. And thank you for spending time with us today. As always, let's be kind out there. It starts with you and me. Have a great day.